Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Asiya. I am your host, Asiya Nasir Shahid, and today's episode is a two-part special, both of extreme importance to our young girls in our community. The first discussion that we're going to have with the panel of girls that you see here with me is on the topic of the controversial movie, the Netflix movie called Cuties. This particular movie had the reason why it had a lot of controversy surrounding it, was because this movie was rated M for mature. Yet the girls that it was featuring were girls ranging as young as 11 years old in explicit content. And so it had a lot of backlash towards it. And so today we're going to be discussing that with our very first panel discussion that Conversations of Asiya has ever had. So we've always just interviewed one-on-one, but because of the special nature of the conversation that we're going to be having, I wanted to get the thoughts and the feelings of the girls in our community and the girls of Jessica Cares as it relates to what's happening to them with regard to this movie. The second topic that we're going to be covering today is on the Breonna Taylor case. Not so much specific to the case in and of itself, but on the rise in the deaths of women of color at the hands of law enforcement and how this is impacting our girls. So before we get into our discussion, I would like to introduce our first panelists as they share how this is impacting them in particular, and not just them, but those around them. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with over to it's probably the opposite side for you, but we're going to start with Ivy. Ivy, if you can introduce yourself, your name, your age, and where are you tuning in from? Where are you joining us from?
Hi, I'm Ivy. I'm 13 years old and I'm calling from Deptford, New Jersey.
Welcome, Ivy. Thank you so much for joining our episode today. Next, we have Nevaeh.
Hi, my name's Nevaeh, and I'm calling from New Jersey, Hillsborough, New Jersey, and I'm 14.
Great. Welcome, Nevaeh. Thank you so much for joining us as well. And last but not least, we have Hanan.
Hi, my name is Hanan. I'm 15 and I'm calling from Newark, Delaware.
Wow, Newark, Delaware. So we got 3 New Jerseyans and we have 1 from Delaware, ranging from 13 to 15, right? So we're right at the age of the topic of how this is impacting girls exactly at this age. You know, we have from 11 years old in the movie Cuties, as I mentioned in the introduction. So how many of you have actually seen the movie, seen clips of the movie, or heard about the movie Cuties?
I have.
You heard about what? So you've seen it or heard about it?
Seen it.
You've seen it. And heard about it. What about you, Ivy?
I've also seen and heard about it.
Hanan?
I've heard about it and watched trailers and stuff.
Okay. So here's some of the comments that have been made about this very controversial movie. Comments like, or just words, pedophilia, soft porn, the worst movie they've ever seen. It made them sick and disgusted. They've canceled Netflix because of it. How do you think the women or the girls in this particular movie were portrayed? And how did it make you feel, being that you mirror some of the girls that were in this movie? Who would like to start?
I can start.
Okay.
Well, it just makes me feel like upset, first of all, because it's like, why would you even let your child in a movie like this? First of all, like, did you not read the script or the things that they're supposed to do? Because they do tell you everything they're doing in the movie, and the fact that you let your child do that in front of thousands and thousands of people is just upsetting, and it's just not influencing at all, and not at all. As you can see in the movie, they were influenced by a lot older girls, and they were dancing, and that's not something you should ever be influenced by.
Right. And what was some of the dancing? What was it that made it so bad that people were so upset about, being that these were 11-year-olds? What were the girls actually doing? Because I would like to have a raw and candid conversation so that those who have not seen the movie, those who may not know that their daughters may have watched this movie, I would like for some of our viewers to actually hear what were some of the girls doing in this movie.
So the main character of the movie was in a twerking competition, and all the young girls in that movie were competing to be in a twerking competition at that young age. So,
At the age of 11 years old,
yes, at the age of
a
11.
twerking contest. How provocative did some of this dancing get in this movie?
Um, like pretty provocative. Um, like they were up on stage twerking and doing a lot of things in front of a lot of people, um, and adults.
And a
Um, yeah.
And from what I gathered from the movie when I was watching as much as I could stomach of the movie that I saw, it was a lot of peer pressure for some of the girls who initially, or the main character who initially wasn't, into that stuff. It was a lot of peer pressure on her to actually change. And how was she embraced for changing to be more provocative and to be more, uh, yeah, provocative.
They wanted her to do that. Like the older girls that were influencing it, they wanted her to join that inappropriate competition.
Let me ask some of you girls, have you girls had to experience that yourself at some point, in your adolescent life, preteen life, where you were pressured to possibly doing things that were, or wanting, girls wanting you to do things that were of much older, things that much older girls would do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even though the movie was very controversial, you could relate to the main character being pressured into this type of behavior. Where do
Sometimes
you think this, where do you think this pressure is coming from? Where do you think this image of young African American women, Latina women, young girls your age, being looked at this way as far as sexualization? Where's this coming from? Where do you think it's coming from?
Mm.
Is it coming from boys? Is it coming from TV shows? Where do you think it's coming from?
I feel like it's a
Um,
little bit of
oh,
everything.
sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, so we'll start with Nevaeh and then we'll go with Ivy.
I feel like maybe social media and seeing what you feel like you should look like even young kids. So it could be from that and just peer pressure too,
Mhm.
but a lot of like social media.
So social media has played a big influence in how young girls of color should dress and look like. How do you feel about that, Ivy? And what are your thoughts? Where do you think it's coming from?
I definitely also think it's from social media and lots of TV shows, and them not realizing that they are older and you're not supposed to like be acting like that at a young age,
Mhm.
and they're getting too influenced by it.
So girls are being influenced by. Have you been influenced by it at some point? And have those around you, your friends, your classmates, have you seen a change because of social media and the way our women and young girls of color are being portrayed on TV and in music?
Hmm. Yes.
Like in what way?
Like I
Um,
feel like people try to fit a standard that everyone else is, so they hop on the bandwagon and they want to follow what everyone else is doing and what the bigger people are doing and what like famous people are doing. They want to copy what they want to mirror those characteristics, those personalities of
Mhm.
people who are doing things inappropriately.
Yeah, yeah. Have at any point it made you question yourself as a woman of color, feeling like you have to dress a certain way or you have to maybe conform a little bit? And it's okay to have an honest conversation, because when I was your age, I can tell you there were times that I looked at myself and was like, I don't fit these images that I'm seeing. And it made me feel some type of way. And it's only gotten worse as I've raised my daughter, and I'm seeing the girls that I'm working with, I'm seeing that images of our young girls is even worse. So just having an honest conversation, has it ever made you feel somewhat like you may have wanted to conform at some point?
Yes.
Wow. Is this the first time some of you are admitting that out loud?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, no.
Mm-mm.
How many of your friends at school you feel have actually changed? Classmates have changed, and maybe they're different when they're at home.
I feel like I know a few, like right off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Has it changed your relationships with them, where now you're like, we can't be as close as we were, because clearly you want to do the things that have been seen in the movie Cuties. And I'm not jumping on that bandwagon, as Hanan said.
Yeah.
Have it changed some of your friendships where you're not as close?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. What was that conversation like with some of your friends that did conform to the images that they're seeing, on TV and stuff like that? How has that, what was that conversation like, and how did that impact you?
I feel like I never personally talked about it with them. I just kind of drifted away. Like, I just moved away from, like, seeing that person every day, or like talking every day. Like, every once in a while, okay, but not as much as it was in the beginning.
Yeah. So you just kind of drifted apart. How
Yeah.
many of you have actually had a conversation where you've had that conversation like, look, you going in a direction I'm not really feeling that direction.
It was kind of like a short conversation, but yeah, I definitely had one, and
Mm-hmm.
I was telling her that you need to like not go in that direction because that direction is not going to take you anywhere but a dead end. So
Mm. Are you and that person friends? Did that person listen to you, or was the peer pressure so much so that they still went that direction?
they just still went that direction. We're not friends anymore.
Yeah. So we're talking, about media right now. We're talking about film, and the movie in particular, Cuties. And for those that are just joining us, the movie Cuties is a very controversial movie that came out earlier this year, and it's controversial because the movie is actually rated M for mature, meaning that the content and what you're going to see is for a mature audience. It's not for young children to watch. So viewer discretion is advised. However, the girls that they're promoting, and the characters and the actresses in the movie are of the same age that they're warning parents to not have their children watch. And as Nevaeh was mentioning, and Hanan and Ivy, the provocative dance and the dress in which these girls were dressing in was the reason why this movie was as controversial as it is. And we can see even our girls have seen either snippets of it, seen the movie of it, which I'm challenging now those the viewers, if you have daughters, have you sat down and had that conversation with your daughter if they've seen the movie Cuties? So we're looking at film, and a lot of the film directors are of Caucasian ethnicity, and we can say, well, this is why this is happening in our culture, because we're being viewed as that way. And that is one perspective that we're going to continue to discuss, and I want to discuss that further. But here's another perspective that I want you girls to give me your thoughts on. So while that in and of itself is true, we have images in our own community, in the African American community, women of color, Afro Latina women, Latina women, participating in songs like WAP. We have Cardi B, who, the same as Cuties. She was interviewed and was actually asked, would you let your daughter listen to this song? And she actually said, no, I would not let my daughter listen to this kind of music. However, She is promoting this music knowing that young girls your age are listening to it. So we see this dilemma is not only with outside forces, but even within our own community. How do you girls feel about that? That even women that look like us are promoting this type of image of being sexualized? How do you feel about Cardi B's music and, you know, the song WAP and being portrayed in a very provocative way? How do you girls feel about that coming from our own community?
It's definitely like sad because like that's why we have like stereotypes in the first place. But yeah, it's not something that, well, like they don't realize that it's not only adults listening to their songs, and they have to be careful what they put in their songs because no one's going to follow the rules. It might be an adult song, but kids are going to listen to it. No one can really stop them from it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That is such a good point. Ivy, anybody, you know, anyone, Hanan or Nevaeh, you have anything you want to add to what Ivy just said?
So I agree with Ivy and like what she said. Basically, um, they're putting all those nasty words in the songs, and they're not noticing that they have a lot, like their audience is a lot younger than they think it is, and they're putting out that music and influencing it, and people that are young are listening to
Mm,
it. It probably should be listened to
right,
by younger audiences.
right. So being that it's coming from our own women, you know, even our own women, and it's a conscious decision, because if someone can say, I wouldn't let my own daughter listen to this music, it's a conscious decision then to put out a certain type of music that you know is, you know, is going to be influential to someone else's daughter. So being that you are the someone else's daughter, and this is coming from women who look like us, come from the same communities that we come from, has this affected you as far as your self-image as a woman of color?
It definitely like scares me because the fact that I'm like there's people that are my age and my color that are getting influenced from this music, which
Mhm.
is a really big like no. Like
Does anyone, thank you, Ivy, does anyone know the history of where this is coming from? You know, the roots of sexualization of Black women and girls. Does anybody know or have an idea of where this started? Because it did have a start. Are you girls aware of that?
No.
Okay. Well, back in February, actually, you know, for our viewers, February 20th of 2019, there was an article that was written called from an organization called blackburner.org. You can actually look it up. The article is called The Historical Roots of the Sexualization of Black Women and Girls. And in the article, it mentioned that this whole stemming of sexualization when it comes to Black women and girls started from slavery. That it started from slavery, and that if we can look at different images that when they went to, you know, Ghana and different areas of where they captured slaves, obviously the way the women dressed were very different. So when we look at our African ancestry and you look at images of the women, although it's cultural, how are our women dressed in those countries, you know, in Ghana and in those places? How are they dressed? When you see images of women in their native, you know, where they're from, how are they dressed? When we see even now today images when they show us women in Africa in their villages and so forth, how are the women dressed? How are the women even dressed in the movie Roots? There's no wrong answer, girls. Y'all can just, you know, this is a free conversation. How are the women dressed? Are they fully clothed?
No, not like not all the time.
So the majority of women that are from Ghana, from those villages where they took people into slavery, how were those women dressed? So let's just go back in history, from your history books and pictures that you've seen. How are the women dressed?
They definitely
What is
have
usually
like
shown?
skin showing.
Sometimes even their breasts are showing, right?
Yeah.
But this wasn't a means of wanting to attract the opposite sex, but this was just a cultural thing of how our women dress in, Ghana and Nigeria and all of the other places, right? But when those who came from other countries to take them into slavery, they were looked upon as a sexual object because they were looking at their body parts. When you see pictures of our women of color and our ancestors standing on the auction block to be sold off, how were they dressed?
Inappropriately.
In what way, Hanan? Let's talk about it. How are they inappropriately dressed?
Um, I don't think. I'm pretty sure that they didn't have clothes on.
Speak up, sweetheart, so we can all hear you.
I'm pretty sure that they didn't have clothes on.
Some of them didn't have clothes on, and some of them had very little clothes on the auction block. So when they were, being gawked at and looked at, these are women who are standing with no clothing on. Meanwhile, when you look at those that are looking to purchase them, Caucasian women, how are the Caucasian women standing next to the, potential slave owner? How are these women dressed?
Fully clothed.
Completely clothed.
Fully clothed.
Properly, and like
Exactly. So the image was already being placed in the minds of, African women are, well endowed. Their bodies are showing. They're not being treated with respect. They're being looked at as inferior, and being looked at as sexual objects, which is why a lot of our women were raped, not just for the purpose of creating more slaves, but also because of the impression or the perception that these women are of sexual objects. So look at all the way from history. This is how we've been perceived. Now, fast forward all the way into 2020. How are our same women of color, being portrayed? In videos, in music, and even from our own women who have adapted this stereotype, as Ivy said. How are they dressed today?
So I feel like it's still provocative, like still inappropriate clothing and inappropriate videos, inappropriate words, not like something that we should portray ourselves as, and not a stereotype that anyone should want on themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else has a comment about that, of the impact, the psychological impact that not only has it had on other ethnicities as it relates to us, but how we even see ourselves? Do you see the connection? So I want to ask you, being that we see the connection, I want to ask you girls a real introspective, really self-reflective question, and being honest with ourselves. Has this impacted how you view women of color? When you see us on film like that, when you see us in radio and music like that, in music videos, and even our men viewing us in a certain way, how has that made you feel as a young girl of color?
it's sad, and it makes me think like that there's my people just like doing like they're my people standing there, and they're influencing the wrong things, and like that's just like a stereotype. Like I said before, it's like a stereotype of what they should wear, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really sad because it's wrong, and like, yeah.
And how do you feel, being that you're different, that this is something that you're saying, look, I'm not adapting to this stereotype? How has that impacted you, Ivy?
It's like that's just what they think of me, and it's not me at all. I don't do that, and the fact that they just think everybody is like that is also sad because not everyone's like that. or not every colored person is like that.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Nevaeh? How has this,
Um,
looking at yourself, a reflection of yourself being portrayed like this, how has that impacted your way of looking at your self-image as a beautiful Black woman?
it definitely like sometimes makes me feel prejudged because of the stereotypes that people have for women of color, but it it definitely like has an impact on me and like a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I like look past that because I know who I am,
Mm,
but a lot of people just like already feel this way about women of color when they really don't even know them.
right, right. I so agree with what you just said. Hanan, again, the question, I'm going to ask you the same question. Looking at yourself, being a mirror of what of women, girls looking just like you in these type of provocative movies like Netflix, having designers, fashion designers creating clothes like Fashion Nova, creating clothing for young girls as young as 5 and 6 years old that are extremely um, scantily made. How does that make you feel that your culture and you is being viewed that way? Has it impacted you, and how do you feel?
I feel like people shouldn't want to put themselves out there like that. And it basically like sets a standard that
Mm,
um you should look like this and you should dress like this, or you're going to be viewed as weird or different, or someone who's like not cool. And it's also upsetting because not everybody wants to be dressed inappropriately and do inappropriate things, especially as a kid, as a teenager, in high school, in middle school. Like, not everybody wants to do all those adult things as a young person.
mhm. So you're just like, look, hey, I want to just be a kid. And, I don't want to be bullied, or I don't want to be pressured, or I don't want to feel like something's wrong with me because I'm not following that trend. Who do you think are the most vulnerable amongst your age group when it comes to movies like this and music like WAP and, things like that? Who do you think are the most vulnerable?
Kids like in like intermediate school and middle school, like 5th to 8th grade,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, or even like 4th.
Especially because now we're having there's a lot more technology and everybody's on the internet, everyone's on social media.
Yeah.
So like, even if you don't want your kid to see it, eventually they're gonna see it.
This
So
is a lot
it's
of access.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What about girls who are being brought up in homes where it's a single parent home and their mom has to work? And like Hanan was saying, there's not a lot of supervision as to what's being watched. You think they're vulnerable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the young girl whose father, who's not present in their life, not active in their life, and they're seeing that this is the way girls are getting attention from men? Do you think that they're vulnerable?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Nevaeh, you said something so profound. You said, when I asked you, who do you think is most vulnerable? You said the girls that are between the grades of fifth and eighth grade. And in fifth grade, that's like 10 years old. Sixth grade is 11. So when you talk about that, isn't that the same age as the girls that were in the movie? Um,
Yeah.
right? They were right at that age, very vulnerable to that. So girls their age, as you said, having the access, Hanan, that you said, they're extremely vulnerable to seeing this type of images at the same age as the girls that they're watching on TV. So you girls are just hitting it right on the head as to, you know, who's going to be the most vulnerable and who's going to be the most impacted by this, because they're not at an age where they can think about this. So I want to ask you another question. I really would, and this is for the viewers and the parents that have tuned in and listening. what do you feel parents and community leaders can do to actually change this narrative of, as you said, the stereotype? What do you think parents and community leaders can do to change this narrative?
Hmm. Um, Maybe just like make sure that your child knows like who they are or like support them
Mm-hmm.
um like in their situations because it is like hard for kids, especially like younger generations now. So, yeah, definitely like support your kids.
So I want to delve deeper into what you just said. So you said parents, you said have a conversation with your kids and let them know who they are. What do you mean by that? What exactly do you mean by that?
Like just because like kids like can feel like even me like people my age can feel very like self-conscious and
Yeah.
um just like affected by a lot of the things going on right now and like peers and stuff. So you just want to make sure that your kid is okay and like they feel like they have a support system.
Mm, that they have a support system and that they kind of have like a sounding board that they can
Mm-hmm.
share those feelings with. Good point. What about you, Ivy or Hanan? How do you think parents and community leaders like myself, can help change the narrative?
They need to be more careful and like see what their kid sees, and they need to also have another talk with them that um, that's not something that you should get influenced by ever, and you don't want to grow up too fast because you only have one life as a child. So
Yeah. Yeah, you're an adult way longer than you are a kid, right? So it's like enjoy that 1 year that you're gonna be 11, that 1 year you're gonna be 13. Whereas in your 20s, you got a whole decade to be in your 20s, a whole decade to be in your 30s. So yeah, you're an adult a lot longer than you are a child. So yeah, to enjoy your childhood and it's okay to be a kid and not have to grow up so fast. Great, because these are great points. Hanan, what do you think? What do you think that parents and community leaders can do to lend to changing the narrative of how we're being perceived?
So I basically want to piggyback off of what Nevaeh and Ivy said. So like talking to your kids, letting them know that you are always there, and um, I feel like parents should wait. One second, lost my train of thought. One second. Um,
So you're saying that you think parents should sit down and have a conversation with their kids?
Yes, and always let them know, like, but you shouldn't be too, like, you want to go easy on the kid because I feel like if you, like, you immediately push that on the kid, like, instead of slowly bringing it up to them, and if you are too strict with what you are teaching your kid, that will cause them to be sneaky, like, and
Mm,
want to, like, if you don't give them a reason why you shouldn't do this or why you shouldn't act like that, then they'll want to be like not listen. They're gonna want to break your rules and not listen to what you have to say to them about anything.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. So what you're saying is don't have the reaction of and my mom used to always say this. She said as we got older, she said there were things that we would share with her that on the inside she felt like, oh my God, but she had to kind of keep her composure and then share with us later as we were adults how it made her feel. But in the moment, being like, okay, I have to still compose myself so that when my child can feel comfortable sharing certain things with me so that way that they'll come to me first. That's kind of like what you're saying, Hanan.
yes,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you make sure that you are there for them, even if something that they says is like, whoa, like wow, you really did that, but you have to like you said, compose yourself and make sure that they don't feel bad that they shared that thing with you.
Mm. Excellent points. Parents, I hope that you are listening to what these girls are saying. These girls are dropping gems, and this is coming from the mouths of babes. You know, they're the ones that are being portrayed negatively in media. They're the ones that are being portrayed, you know, in this particular movie Cuties in a way that is just awful, you know. And yet this is the advice that they're saying, that if you want us to share with you how we're feeling and how we're being impacted, place affirmations on us, tell us, you know, that we're better than this, you know, share with us that it is okay to be different and not want to dress provocative, and be composed, that when they do share something that, you know, you're kind of like, whoa, you know, I wasn't expecting this, that you make them still feel comfortable, that they're still loved and still supported. And here I'm a guiding tool to help you navigate this kind of, as Nevaeh said, this kind of shaky, you know, moment in your life, right? You guys have, I mean, some great things. What would you, that was to the parents, what would you say to young girls your age that are being pressured into this, or feeling like they have to conform? What advice would you give them, that they don't have to be like the girls in the movie Cuties? They don't have to dress like, you know, the songs WAP, and you know, be like what's Cardi B, and what's the other girls? I know it's Stallion something. I don't know her.
Thee
What's
Stallion.
what's her name?
Megan Thee Stallion.
Okay, Megan B. Stallion. That they don't have to dress that way. What advice would you give young girls? So I want to start with Nevaeh, Ivy, and then Nevaeh, Hanan, and then Ivy. What advice would you give your peers?
To just like look at people who aren't doing that. If you don't feel comfortable with those artists and what they're doing, just like try and not look at what they're doing, and look at other people who are successful but are doing the opposite. That's some advice that I would give them.
Good advice. Okay, Hanan, what advice would you give, you know, your peers?
So I feel like you have to understand that you are your own person, and you need to know that you you like you do your own things, and everyone else will be different, or everyone else will follow a specific standard. And it's okay to be different. It's okay to be weird. Like, it's okay to be like a specific like, you be who you want to be, and you act how you want to act, as long as it's not inappropriate or anything. So you should do what like whatever you want to do, or however you want to act as a person. It shouldn't, and you also shouldn't let your friends affect that. Like, you should make sure that you're choosing friends that they let you be yourself around them.
Wow. So you're basically saying be unapologetically yourself in spite of the norm. And as Nevaeh mentioned earlier, social media may be promoting this. So this may be like the popular thing, and you're just saying, look, I'm not rocking with that, you know, and just be unapologetic about it. That's awesome. And then you said surround yourself with friends who support that, who is in alignment with that. That's great. All right. Last but not least, Ivy, what advice, what you know, thoughts do you have that you would like to share with girls who may be watching that are your age?
To piggyback off of what Nevaeh and Hanan said, yes, you have to. It's okay to be different, and if you're different, it'll be like worth it in the end. And you have to be a leader, not a follower, because followers are gonna get you. And yeah, just be yourself. So.
I think those are profound words, Ivy. Because if you look at social media in and of itself, it's what they promote. How many, what can you have?
Followers.
Followers, exactly. And Ivy just said, you know, be a leader, not a follower. You know, so I think that is profound advice to give. And it's hard. It's not easy, is it?
Mm-mm.
When everybody's around you. But as Ivy just mentioned, it's worth it in the end, because you walk away, you get to look back at your childhood and not have regret, not have shame, not have guilt. you can actually walk with your head held high, saying, in spite of everything that was going on, I held integrity to myself, right?
Yeah.
I think you guys are just, I mean, I love you guys. You guys are just so, I know I picked some good girls for this talk show. So I thank you so much for the advice that you're giving, and just how it's impacted you, where you have thoughts of that, and just being candid and transparent. And I think that is empowering in and of itself. You participating in the Jessica Cares programs and various programs are learning that the more you're honest with yourself, the more you can give permission for someone else to do the same, and really make that kind of looking at themselves in the mirror and saying, what changes do I need to make in order to be a leader and not a follower, right? And be unapologetic about who I am. So thank you so much for sharing this particular first half of what we were talking about today, which is the movie Cuties. So now I want to, Nevaeh kind of, it segued into something that she said earlier. And she said, with everything else that's going on around the world, and we have a lot happening right now around the world. We have the election, which is probably, one of the most controversial elections we've had in a long time. We have COVID-19. We have social distancing. We have schools that are, virtual learning, and teachers trying to navigate that whole situation. Social lives have been challenged, for you young girls. And we've had civil unrest with the Breonna Taylor case, George Floyd, and so many others. So right now we're going to shift our conversation into exactly that topic, which is everything else that's been happening around the world, but in particular, the rise in women of color dying at the hands of law enforcement. So I just want to share some information, some statistics first, share some names, and then we're going to get into the conversation. Since 2015, the Washington Post reported that over 247 women of color were killed by the hands of law enforcement, those who are to protect and serve. And out of that 247 women that were killed, 89 of them were in their own home or in front of their own home. So I'm going to name a couple of women that may be familiar to us and some that may not be familiar to us, and it might be even shocking. Breonna Taylor, 26 years old. Geraldine Townsend, 72 years old. DeCynthia Clements, 34 years old. India Kager, 27 years old. Regina Nicholas, 58 years old. Alteria Woods, 21 years old. Hannah Williams, 17 years old. And Sandra Bland. When you heard me saying those names, their ages, and these are women that were killed by the hands of law enforcement, when you heard those names, girls, how did that make you feel?
Very, very scared, and it makes me think like,
Speak up,
am
speak up,
I
Ivy, so we can hear you.
okay? Um, it makes me really, really scared, and like makes me think like, who's next? Like, it could be anybody in any day. And when I heard their ages, especially 72, it made me think like, what could a 72-year-old possibly do to you to make you kill her? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Hanan and Nevaeh? How did hearing their names, hearing their ages, hearing the statistics of just in a span of 3 years, how many women of color have been killed, ranging as young as 17 and as old as 72? How did that make you feel?
So I feel upset, honestly, and it's like, what what can we do to stop like police brutality? And it's not like it can happen overnight, but there needs to be a change because um and people are saying that it's not about race, but it clearly is. And it's like we're going back in time, like we're going back to the 1800s, when slavery was around and black people were getting killed for no reason, just for being black.
Mm,
So I feel like we need to find a change, and we need to um, change as people. And I feel like we should um, try to find ways to stop police brutality and change
mhm,
as a
mhm,
whole. Yeah.
mhm. Wow. I'm almost kind of speechless. I don't even know, and then that's pretty difficult for me. I always got something to say, and I'm just listening to you girls, and I know how it has made me feel as a almost 48-year-old woman, and just hearing from you how it's making you feel, it's almost leaving me speechless. Nevaeh, how did it make you feel?
It definitely like shocked me. The ages, especially 72 is there that's unacceptable, and 17 is just everyone just it's not right, and it definitely like shocked me.
Hmm. And the majority, if not all of them, there either was no charges pressed. And as we can see in the Breonna Taylor case, charges were, made against the officers, and they were recently acquitted, of those charges. They paid a civil amount to the family, but as far as jail time, as far as serving, justice being served for a young girl who was killed in her own home, that's not going to happen. How does this make you feel towards law enforcement?
It's scary because the people that are supposed to be helping you are just killing you, and it's like, who am I supposed to call? Like, if there's something wrong or something
Mm,
happens, I'm just scared because there's too many people of color dying from this, and it's unacceptable. It's 2020, and there's a lot more things in this world we need to worry about than somebody's race.
wow. Powerful, powerful statement. I mean, you asked a question that I have even asked myself. If something was to go down, who am I going to call? Because I don't even feel safe, calling law enforcement, afraid of what could possibly happen if I move the wrong way, or if I say something, how can this narrative change? Am I going to be a hashtag? Like, that's a real, feeling. So when you said that, like, who am I going to call? That's a real feeling. Girls, how do Nevaeh, Hanan, what are your thoughts? Like, how do you feel about law enforcement right now?
So I completely agree with what Ivy said. Um, it's like my whole view on police changed. Like I understood that there was like brutality before, but now it's just like it's really out of proportion, and you would never think that, oh, if I like and what if one day my one of my family members or is a hashtag, like you never want to think about that, but with what's happening in the world, it could happen, and it's really honestly like it's unsettling, and you like it's upsetting, and I don't want to ever have to think about that, but you have to be careful because like African Americans were currently like under this whole stereotype of all these different things, and it's like really upsetting.
Yeah. 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 I say the same thing when my sons, before it just used to be a worry when my sons used to walk out, the house. I used to say a prayer every time they walked out the house. And now I'm doing the same thing for my daughter. When my daughter walks out the house, I'm just as nervous, and praying that she's gonna be okay. And it's not even so much from the things that I used to think about before, although they still are here, like robberies and things like that. But I'm also praying for my children to be protected from quote unquote law enforcement. And that's unsettling. Yeah, very unsettling. Nevaeh, how do you feel about law enforcement now?
Fearful, definitely, because it was like difficult before, but
Mhm.
just numbers rising in death, and it's crazy. because it shouldn't be happening because you're supposed to be protecting people, but you're killing them and causing them harm
Mm-hmm.
that's not right.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you girls, because I think I'm hearing this and I'm thinking now as I'm talking to you, maybe I should have had a psychologist on this, and maybe we need to have another, part two of this. But has this created some level of anxiety in you yourself? Do you have anxiety when you leave the house? Do you have anxiety when family members leave the house, even including your mom? Now, do you have anxiety about them leaving?
So I
Yeah,
feel like
definitely.
it's honestly really scary. Like even just going outside or just seeing a police car is like honestly, it just like I have this feeling in the pit of my stomach, like, oh, what if something happens? Like, just be careful, follow everything, and like thinking about my family and everybody, like all my friends and my family who are colored, and I feel like what if something happens to them? I don't like I always pray and make dua for them because I don't want anything of the sort to happen to them.
Right. Hmm. I'm feeling a little emotional right now because I'm just listening to you. Ivy, go ahead.
It's just every time like I feel, every time I hear like sirens, I just get this chill down my spine. It's just weird because of all the like movies and stuff, and the fact that what something that also gives me anxiety is the fact that it's not even surprising that the police are literally killing us every day. It's not surprising. It's like it's a normal thing, and it's sad.
Mm, so that's, yeah, yeah. Nevaeh, Nevaeh.
Um, yeah, it's definitely like it was happening before, and it was like definitely serious, and it had an impact, but just now it's like it's happening every day, and it's like when is it gonna stop? When are
Yeah.
people like cops and police gonna just stop doing that?
Hmm.
Like killing innocent people who aren't doing anything to you.
Right. And we see the difference between other ethnicities, and even in a hostile situation, they're handling it much differently than in an unarmed situation with us, and we're being gunned down, and we're seeing it on camera. So yes, I can imagine the visual. I want to ask you, do you feel that it has caused, not only in your community, but even amongst your friends, do you feel that it has caused some level of some type of mental trauma, whether it be anxiety, depression, or anything like that? Do you feel like it has impacted young girls like you, seeing the rise in women who look like us dying? Do you feel, Neve, you nodded your head yes. What about you, Ivy and Hanan? Do you feel like other people that your age are feeling the same way, and that it has caused some level of maybe depression or anxiety in them too?
I feel like it definitely does because why should we even have to worry about people who are supposed to help hurting our family or hurting our friends or
Mhm.
um, being disrespectful or like rude to anybody who doesn't deserve it. So
Right.
it's like scary and it makes people upset because we shouldn't have to be worried about this if police are supposed to serve and protect.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So I want to ask you, because Hanan, you said something. When we first started talking about this particular topic, you said um, something needs to be done. And Nevaeh, I heard you saying that, and Ivy, I heard you saying it. What do you feel then should be done? Coming from you, what would you like to see done? Whether it be from the youths, whether it's from adults, what do you think should be done?
I think that um,
Speak up, Ivy.
I think that people really need to realize that race is not like it shouldn't define a person and shouldn't be a problem anymore. And I want racism to end because I mean it's we're all people and the fact that because of the color of our skin, we're a whole different human being. We're a whole different type of species or something, and
Mhm.
they treat us like animals, and it's not cool at all.
How do you think we change that? What do you think can be done about that? Because racism is something that's taught at a very early age.
Yeah.
So how do you think, what do you think should be done?
I definitely think that they need to be educated, and because obviously they aren't educated at all, and they need to be told and taught that racism isn't right, and we're no different than you.
Okay. What about you, Hanan and Nevaeh? What do
Um,
you think should be done? What suggestions do you think could change what we're seeing?
I feel like so what you said that racism is taught from a young age, so I agree with that, and I feel like people who are racist, like you should not have a job, like doctors, police officers, um, like you, no one should have a job if they are racist because there is visible that people who are colored are getting different service, different reactions from people who are racist in like those type of fields that are important.
So you feel that once it is acknowledged in the workplace, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's in a medical profession, working in banking, or any other profession, once that person is acknowledged that they are a racist, that person should be terminated immediately.
Yes, and taught, and they should, because I feel like it's a lot deeper than we think it is. And
Mhm.
um in books like our social studies books, we weren't taught a lot of the things about slavery. Like I feel like they sugarcoated a lot of different things that are in the books, and so from a young age we're taught, and it's mainly lies.
So it's
So
sugar. So you think so? If I'm on, and I don't want to cut you off, I want you to keep going. But I think you're hitting on some really good points. So you're saying that even the educational system should change and should tell the real story of what happened in slavery. So that way it's being taught at an early age as well what really happened.
yes, what
At,
really
well,
happened and
yes.
what colored people had to deal with from so long ago, and how it's still a thing, and it shouldn't be a thing because, like Ivy said, the color of my skin should not matter. It's 2020. There's other things to worry about, and there's other things that need to be talked about other than racism. It shouldn't even be a thing anymore. And so yeah, like I was saying, it's a lot deeper than we think it is, and it goes down to even how people are treated in hospitals, not getting
Mm.
not getting treated properly, and it's really sickening, honestly. Like to think that just because I am a different color than you are, that I would be being treated differently, even especially in hospitals, honestly, because why would you ever deny someone a right, like
Yeah.
to be helped? Like it
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense.
Right, right. I agree with you. I mean, we're talking about life and death in the hospital at times. And just because someone has a bias, so they're saying that if so it goes back to your point that if there, it should be reported immediately. If someone says something of a racial, comment about someone, they should be removed immediately because it can uh, have an effect on how they treat patients, how they treat people that in law enforcement when they go to someone's home or stop someone. Yeah, I agree with you. What about you, Nevaeh? What things would you like to see? What do you think should be changed?
I definitely agree with what has already been said that we should be taught because even in like social studies like classes, we don't even touch on like Black History Month even at
Yeah.
all anymore. It's completely like passed over to different subjects. So there should definitely be like more teaching on what should be done, because that's what's like causing all of what's going on, like racism and everything. Like, people aren't being taught the way that they should be, and they're being filled with nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Ivy, you want to say something?
Yeah, so like they both said like the education needs to change because the fact that we have to learn our own history while like every other thing is just there for the rest of other races and stuff, it's sad. And I feel like, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like I'm learning the same exact thing every single year of like every single grade. I mean, like, and like all we learn about is ancient history. Like I feel like I've learned it all before, and they just keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it.
And it's not even scratching the surface of what needs to be taught, so that way people are educated as to, you know, the struggle and what we've gone through. And also just that, you know, on the flip side, if it was your family, how would this make you feel? And then seeing that some things just have not changed. A lot of things have not changed, right? So I agree with you. You know, my mother-in-law, she was an African American studies teacher, and she taught for many years in Cleveland, Ohio. And to this day, she still have students. I mean, it was a curriculum. It was a curriculum that, I mean, it was not like what you're saying. It was really intense, and the kids from your age to older really got to appreciate and learn their history. And so it made an impact, so much so that even her students today, that she's long retired, they still come up to her and talk about how much they benefited from her class and that they're teaching their children. So yeah, it does make a difference. So let me pose something to you. Do you think that that's something that community organizations like myself should pick up the baton and say, well, this is a void that's missing? Part of empowering our youth, part of empowering our girls is teaching them what's not being taught in school, and maybe even inviting those of other ethnicities to learn about our history. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like we should act together as a community, come together, and we should learn about what they don't teach us in books and what they don't teach us in school and what we're not learning from a young age.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that way that we can be more knowledgeable and aware of what actually happened, and that way other people of other ethnicities can understand what happened and what colored people went through the right way, instead of what they just sugar coated in books and textbooks and while we were growing up.
What about law enforcement? What kind of things do you think we can do as a community to challenge law enforcement to change their policy? What things can we do? What things can we actively do right now, as youth, to say we want to change the narrative? Any ideas? Well,
Um,
I know somebody wanted to say something.
so I feel like they can take an assessment, like what do they think is right in the community, and that way we'll be able to tell like what people's different opinions on things are and how they feel about race in the community. And yeah, I feel like they should take a test to like evaluate what they're thinking on different situations
Mhm.
in like the community.
How would you feel about participating in part of the police academy training, and saying part of the curriculum is they have to speak to young youth like you who are being killed, women of color, boys of color, you know, African American boys and girls girls and boys, Afro Latina, Latin, you know, brothers and sisters, you know, Asian brothers and sisters, you know, actually sitting down, and there's actually a course where they have to engage you, to learn that you are not to be feared. What do you think about that? Do you think that would help?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like it would definitely.
Would you participate in something like that?
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
There was a little hesitancy there. Where's the apprehension? Because are you like, yeah?
So I feel like it would be harder with school, especially like how we are right now with the virtual learning and stuff.
What if we had the same conversation we're having right now, virtually, scheduled ahead of time, just like we scheduled this conversation ahead of time, and had that conversation with law enforcement? Would you be actively participating to say, I want to be part of changing the narrative?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to get some thoughts, and I'm putting it out here because I have friends in law enforcement. I have parents out here. I have colleagues who are community leaders. Myself, in the community. I want to get some ideas out there so that way we can take an active and listening to the voice. You have a voice. You're sharing it, and we want to be able to see that we're following up on that. So that's why I'm asking you: Would you say yes? I'm going to pick up that baton and do that.
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to get your final thoughts. I would love for you to share your final thoughts. If you want to speak to law enforcement, if you want to speak to your community, what do you want to say to them? So we're going to start with Hanan, Ivy, and then Nevaeh.
So I feel like we need to come up with a mutual agreement on what should be changed and what should be taught in the community. And we as people should start, and like we should understand that racism shouldn't be a thing anymore, like I was saying, and that we all bleed the same color. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. Ivy?
I think that, yeah, I also agree with Hanan that racism cannot be a
Speak
thing.
up, sweetie, so we can hear you. I know you have a low voice, but we want everybody to hear your final thoughts.
I agree with Hanan that racism should not be a thing anymore, and we need to come together and realize that. And definitely we need to change our education and like in the schools and stuff, because it's most of it is like just whitewashed and very wrong, and the fact that they're not teaching it is pretty upsetting. And yeah, it's just we need to change before
Yeah.
it's too late.
And we have to be part of that change, girls. It's easy to point the finger and say, well, this is what I think should be changed, but we have to be part of that change. We have to be part of, if we're going to do this, I'm going to be an active participant in doing that. Okay, Nevaeh, what's your final thoughts?
Definitely that things do need to change, and that we should find like every way possible to change what's going on so that future generations don't have to go through what our generations and generations before us had to go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Girls, I want to thank you so much once again for just the great conversation that we just had. It just really shows that, for those that are listening, for parents, this is my final thoughts, and we're going to close with this. Our children have a voice. Our children are being impacted by what they're seeing, whether it's sexualization of young girls of color, whether it be what we're seeing, the civil unrest. Our children are being impacted. We're not the only ones as adults dealing with COVID-19 and all of the changes that's happening around the world. Our children are also, and they have a voice, and we have to give them a platform to be able to share that voice. And then we have to support, what we hear. Our girls just today, just on a panel of 3 girls, were able to give such great advice to not only, their community, their peers, but even to adults of what we can do to open up this dialogue, for us to be able to change the narrative of self-image, and not look at ourselves first and foremost as sexual objects, but that we are women of intellect, women of value, women of honor and integrity. And so we have to continue to have those conversations with our young girls and letting them know that they are queens and they are princesses, and this is not a fairy tale, that they own those crowns. And then last but not least, we have to, participate in helping our children lower their level of anxiety and fear that they have around the world, because it is a scary place. So we have to make sure that we're doing our due diligence. So if you're educators, what are you educating in your classrooms? What is your plan for 2021, school year, to make sure that you're educating your students to have a better knowledge of this? We're teaching everything else, from every agenda that you can think of, but none of it includes, what we're seeing, which is the disparity that, African Americans and people of color are just having to deal with on a daily basis. We need to change the narrative. We need to include our children. Police, if you're watching and you're hearing our girls, create a part of your police academy curriculum to include, youth of color, so that way they no longer are an image of fear, but that there's an understanding and that they're human. Just like Hanan said, we're all human and we want to be treated as such. So that's what I want to close. My girls, Ivy, Nevaeh, and Hanan, thank you so much for sharing your Saturday afternoon with us. If you want to contact Jessica Cares, you can always reach us for our programs. Our programs is all about empowerment. This talk show, Conversations with Asiya, is all about educating and empowering the women of our community and the ones that they are raising. So if you have a topic discussion that you think that we should address on our talk show, please reach out to me at jessica@jessicacares.org, or go on our website, www.jessicacares.org, and leave a message for us on our contact page, and we will, consider your topic, or if you're thinking of someone that we should have as a guest on our show, please do so. Girls, again, thank you. I can't thank you enough. Our audience thanks you. Nevaeh, Hanan, and Ivy, you guys have a great day, and stay tuned for the next episode of next month in November of Conversations with Asiya.